Oh my God. Nancy Guthrie case updates are getting crazy. Today is Tuesday, March 17th, 10 a.m. Eastern. And for those of you that thought you were going nuts that saw the video I released yesterday, well, it was a breakout video. It was going viral. When I would learn, just as it was going viral, that scanner that I was talking about is potentially not a real scanner clip. So I took it down. So for those of you screaming at me, know your facts. Well, let's look at the facts. Because I spent the last while looking for that scanner download that 857 Tucson uploaded, Nerdy Addict uploaded. And I'll tell you what the results are according to my research. 0 scanners on any of the 3 platforms that I looked for that have recorded that specific scanner that was launched into the public of possible break and enter in Annie Guthrie's home a night ago, 2 nights ago. Today's March 17th. So rather than just delete that portion, which I was trying to do, I accidentally deleted the whole thing. And what I was also going on to talk about, for those of you, sorry, friends, I love you. I saw some comments going, what the dang? I was in the middle of watching JLR take that route and the video vanished. I'm sorry, you did not imagine it. Yes, I did report, and Jennifer Coffendorfer did as well. JLR had run across a neighbor who had said that Annie had given her a map of a specific route out within a day or so, or not her. She was one of several people in a group chat that Annie Guthrie had sent out for evidence that they may have before or after the crime took place. And it was a very specific route. And I was just curious how that information was given to Annie, how she had knowledge of a route, because if there is a route, if there are suspects and there are cars they're looking for, well, that is completely contrary to this next bombshell news report that just came out, which we're going to listen to here. According to Megyn Kelly's guests last night, Sheriff Nanos and the FBI have 0 suspects. 45 days in, well, this was on day 44. Megyn Kelly's reporting is that they have 0 suspects. So we're going to watch that. And furthermore, it's time to release the family because they have all passed polygraph tests, apparently. The other thing I want to comment on for people that are know your facts, I did try to check the facts before releasing that video, and that's the problem when people, like the reporter here, and I'm not throwing shade at the guy that put the video out. There was 2. There was Nerdy Addict on Facebook, and then there was 857 Tucson. But when that clip was reported, he failed to attach it to a time, to say whether it was a time. And so as I'm launching that video and recording it, JLR had confirmed to him that it was the night before and not the night of the abduction, which I thought it was Annie and Tommaso coming into the scene, calling in, going, oh my God, like, we don't know if there's people in the back of my mother's house. And everybody's yelling at me, no, it's the night of Annie's. Well, apparently, according to my researching and my sleuthing and ChatGTP searching in all the scanner data banks, that scanner video doesn't exist. So I don't know where that clip was taken from. I don't know if it was altered. I don't know. But that's the recommendation I was given. I'm not saying it. I don't know. So we're not putting it out there anymore. We don't know. And that is the reality of this case. We have not a bat SHIT clue on what's really going on in this case. Everybody is guessing. And to prove that point, JLR in that clip that I showed you that I had to delete had gone back to the pants that were located right by Annie and Tommaso's home in that ditch. And as he's doing that, Mark the Shark is around the corner and Tommaso comes out and tells him to please leave. And finally, those pants were collected. And Ashley Banfield was like, what the dang? We're day 40 something. And the pants that look like something Nancy might wear with the knee brace are sitting in the ditch beside her child's home, day 44, and they haven't been collected. And now we're learning they got no leads. They got no suspects. They got leads, rather. They got no suspects. None of their leads have been fruitful enough to claim a suspect. Well, I wonder why. I mean, how botched have they made this case? How effed up have they? Look at, we've heard it. Every single person out there in law enforcement, retired, active, etc., profiler, they have all said, why the dang was that crime scene released so early? And then having to go back again and take DNA samples, which we saw, or remove cameras that were on the roof of the guest house that were missed the first day. I mean, there's not an explanation in the world that you can give me to why those cameras were missed on day one and not removed. I just don't get it. There's not an explanation in the world that you can give me as to why that crime scene was released so friggin' early, only to have the DNA trampled all over. So am I surprised when the intel that Megyn Kelly's guest, which we're going to listen to in a minute here, says no suspects? No, I'm not surprised. But I also want to go back to what I was saying in the clip that I showed you that I had to delete yesterday was the proof that the pants had been removed. Now, who took them? We have no idea. I sent JLR an email saying, could you please make sure the FBI collected them and they weren't taken by somebody else, like the suspect watching everybody find them, begs the question why they weren't taken, though. It really begs the question why they weren't taken earlier. And I mean, how much searching could they have done? Really and truly. So we've got false scanner reports going out. We've got, at the same time, news reports by Megyn Kelly's insiders who report that they got no suspects here. It's day 45 this morning, and we got no suspects. And then in that clip, it was also reported by Nancy Grace that I believe it was Nancy Grace, anyways, that I highlighted in yesterday's clip that I had to remove. And it's unfortunate because it was going viral and I regrettably had to remove it because I don't want to put misinformation out there. And I was learning it as the video was going viral and I was trying to clip it to edit that part out. And the whole, like I said, Mercury retrograde, the whole thing just went down to 10 minutes. So those of you that were commenting, no, you didn't just see that happen in front of your eyes for no reason. It was me trying to edit and take out the non-true reporting of that scanner, which I'm going to show you here in a second, and replacing it with, just the rest of the content. So the rest of the content was just me showing a clip of Mark the Shark and Tommaso telling him to leave after JLR had just reported that the pants were removed finally. But then JLR goes to El Churro. And the chef tells him that Nancy Grace is reporting that the FBI had spent 2 days there investigating the staff at El Churro restaurant. And doesn't the chef come out and say, no, they were not here? That is not true. So the bottom line is, whether you're Nancy Grace and Megyn Kelly last night still reporting as if Nancy Grace's reporting is factual, that they did go to El Churro and the chef is telling JLR no, those are mainstream media people. Huge. Both of these women are highly respected. And they're reporting contradictory things. So that's the challenge with the YouTube platform, which is why I always give you the date. But things in true crime are constantly fluid. And unless you're on it 24/7, and even then you wouldn't have the bandwidth, you'd have to have people on it investigating every single report down every single rabbit hole to seeing if it's just an impossible task. So you have to allow for a little bit of grace for those keyboard warriors that are watching, that it's just an impossibility, truthfully, in my opinion, for every report to be known by every true crime podcaster, streamer, media source. It's just really challenging. But what I did do today is I want to show you the Megyn Kelly report. And I do want to highlight what I'm curious about. The one thing we can be certain about in this case is that we have not a clue what's really going on. We don't have a clue. Is it deliberate? Who knows? But I am pretty sure we have not a clue what's going on. The question for me is Megyn Kelly's reporting accurate? Do the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office also have no clue? Or do they have a possible suspect? At this point, I don't think we are going to actually know the truth. And so we're all out there speculating and guessing. We don't have the facts. We don't know what they have, what they don't have. We don't know if they're deliberately trying to keep things from us, which is their obligation. Let's make that factual. Their obligation is to preserve the case. Period. Period. The question remains is, do they even have a possible case? So I wanted to explore today, could Savannah Guthrie sue Sheriff Nanos? Yes, you heard me. Because the one consistent theme we have heard and seen with our own eyes is how effed he's made this investigation. They have released the crime scene early. They've got people trampling over that mat, which we heard with the saliva would have been the best possible DNA source. The flowers that the perp we saw for our own eyes picked up were also left there. The door frame was left there. Did he touch the door frame? We saw holes in his gloves. Showed you that with our own eyes. How could they have zero DNA? Well, is it because of their lack of properly processing the crime scene in the very first beginnings, the days of Nancy's disappearance? That's my question. Could Savannah Guthrie sue the sheriff because he's the one consistent thing we have heard about in this case? He is not good with his reporting. He doesn't appear to know the actual facts. He is confusing the public. And without a doubt, there was some serious missteps in the handling of the beginning of this crime scene. That is across the board. Every single person has not said anything with a law enforcement or criminal profiling background any different than that statement, that they don't understand why that crime scene was not processed for longer, not taped off, not secured better, not taking the mat, the surveillance cameras on the guest house. Why was all that missed? So let's look at Megyn Kelly's reporting, and then let's see what chat says. Can Savannah sue Sheriff Nanos? Let's watch.
Megan, I can report from a very, very reliable source that is boots on the ground there that the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office have no leads, no
Oh,
solid suspects.
what?
And this is from someone boots on the ground that I trust.
Okay,
All right.
let me rewind it.
Ago, Megan, I can report from a very, very reliable source that is boots on the ground there that the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office have no leads. As of about 2 hours ago, Megan, I can report from a very, very reliable source that is boots on the ground there that the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office have no leads, no
Oh,
solid suspects.
what?
And this is from someone boots on the ground that I trust. All right. They have no solid leads. I can also report that it has been confirmed this morning, and I'm sure we all assume this, that every family member passed polygraphs with flying colors. So, what does this other date have in mind? Probably tells me that there was just some images or some type of electronic evidence that's kind of pushing them to try to dive into that date a little bit more. But that is a
That's
conversation
huge,
that I
though.
had.
That information is
It is.
huge. So then that means, I mean, I know some people don't believe in the polygraphs. I do. Um, but if that's true, then we can move on from the brother-in-law and the sister. And it kind of sheds a little more light on the sheriff's statement to NBC that he's had a theory about this case from the beginning, and nothing has moved him off his theory, and that he does believe he knows the motivation for the crime. And in the interim between that first day and now, where he says his theory hasn't changed, he did say that the family had been ruled out. He then kind of begged off of it because, of course, they don't have anybody in custody. So I'm not sure you can say anybody's been totally ruled out. But that's very interesting. I want to play for you the sheriff's comment to NBC News just days ago on how he's saying, contrary to what you're saying, that he thinks he knows the motive, which would be a lead. But you tell me. Here he is.
There is something that's come out in the investigation that gives you a sense of motive here and why this person did this?
You know, I think it's come out from day one. I think from day one, we had some strong beliefs about what happened, and those beliefs haven't diminished.
Do you believe it was a burglary gone wrong?
I'm not going to get into those theories. We have our beliefs. Everybody else has theirs.
Nano says he's intentionally withholding their theory and other details in the case, citing the integrity of the investigation.
But you're saying, Chad, no leads?
You can have a theory. Let me correct the way he worded it. No suspects. All right. You can have leads without suspects, obviously, and that's what they're doing. That's why they keep going back to these residences and these houses and following up with neighbors over and over again. I agree. They're probably on to some type of theory, but we still don't have a suspect.
So as Megan says, oh my gosh, how can that be? That on day 44, which was yesterday's reporting, how could it be that there's no freaking suspects? Oh my gosh. So I decided to just check out, just out of curiosity, whether Savannah Guthrie and family can sue the sheriff. Here's what I found. Short answer, I said, can Savannah Guthrie sue Sheriff Nanos for the fumbling of missing Nancy Guthrie case? Short answer is extremely difficult, but not impossible to sue a sheriff for fumbling an investigation. The bar is very high, but let's not forget, Savannah is an attorney, or was an attorney, is an attorney. Here's the legal reality in plain terms. What's happening in this case? Savannah Guthrie's mother, Nancy Guthrie, is believed to have been abducted from her Arizona home. Investigation is led by Chris Nanos. There has been public criticism of the investigation. Example, alleged mishandling of evidence, contradictions, lack of progress. Why suing a sheriff is hard. This is the key doctrine. In the U.S., law enforcement is protected by legal shields, mainly sovereign governmental immunity. Police and sheriffs are generally not liable for poor performance of duties. Courts policing as a duty to the public at large, not to any one individual. No duty rule. Critical point. Unless the police has a specific special duty to that person, failure to solve or properly investigate a crime is usually not actionable. When a lawsuit could work, for Savannah Guthrie or the family to successfully sue, they need to prove something much stronger than fumbling, such as gross negligence or misconduct, not just mistakes, but reckless disregard, knowingly ignoring critical evidence. Well, I don't know. Could that be argued? Could that be argued that they knowingly left cameras on the guest house? That they knowingly left critical evidence when we saw the flashlight in the guy's mouth? And we've heard from experts, like, you can't hold a flashlight like that and not have saliva coming out. And then he would have been possibly touching his mouth, or drops from that saliva landing on the mat. Is that considered negligent? I guess an attorney would have to tell us. But to me, it seems borderline negligent. But does it head into the whole, gross negligence and reckless disregard? There's also, it needs to have constitutional violations, civil rights claims, for example, fabricating evidence, coercion, or unlawful detention. These are, well, we've seen unlawful detention, a coercive tactic, SWAT running out to detain not people of interest at this point. At least we're not aware of it, because I think the sheriff has gone out to release that, one person's car that they, big Friday 13th, all over for us to watch, middle of the night, that Luke Daly, poor guy. When Savannah Guthrie, for Savannah Guthrie or her family to successfully sue, they would need to prove something much larger, right? So I said gross negligence, constitutional violations, special relationship, or promise of protection. Rare but possible if police make specific assurances and the victim relied on them. Well, he seems to have very much personalized his protection of the family here. He said, back off them. And even though other experts say there's no possible way you can say you've cleared them if there are no suspects, those two things cannot coexist. And he's only giving news reportings, interviews to Savannah's NBC News affiliation now. That's, so is he showing preferred treatment, special relationship, or promise of protection? I'm not sure. Interference with federal investigations, allegations that evidence access with restricted could become relevant if it crosses into misconduct, but that alone doesn't automatically create civil liability. Well, allegations of federal interference with federal investigations. When he sent stuff, I'm just guessing here. I don't know. Like, I'm not accusing him. I'm not saying she can or can't. It seems to me like it's a far stretch. But I'm just, when there was a debate about where to send the DNA evidence that now came back saying, ooh, we didn't find anything to his lab versus the FBI lab. And now, he's still in charge of the case. So we don't have a federal investigation yet. So we can't really say he's investigating, because the FBI are here in a facilitating, helping mode. But man, he seems borderline to me on some of these. What they likely cannot sue for. They generally cannot win a case just because the investigation is slow. The sheriff made poor decisions. The case remained unsolved. Public communication was inconsistent. Those fall under discretionary policy decisions, which are protected. More realistic legal targets if any action happens. Interestingly, current reports suggest legal action is more likely elsewhere. There are indications Savannah may consider legal actions against Ashley Banfield, a journalist, for false reporting about her family, not law enforcement. That's because defamation is far easier to prove. So bottom line, yes, she can try to sue, but winning against the sheriff for mishandling an investigation is very unlikely. And we've also heard professional opinions of Mark Garagos, And oh my God, I'm so sorry for the other guy. I love so much Ashley's friend who reports that there's not a real chance, and you know, that Savannah would successfully be able to do this, because a reporter is a reporter is a reporter, and obviously they were prime suspects or being looked at and or eliminated because their car was in evidence for so long. They've taken polygraphs because every professional law enforcement out there has said they have to go through that process. And so we have already heard professional opinions saying there's not a chance in heck. And the other thing I would say, Savannah, I doubt she's ever going to hear this, but I mean, which Savannah had Guthrie, if the roles were reversed as a news reporter and she was given intel, would she have done the same thing? Yeah, she would have. So it's unfortunate. And this is where, in the case of my dad, Kelly Snyder, the Find Me Group, has said, sheriffs, that's a major issue throughout the United States that we don't have here in Canada. Sheriffs are elected. And you better pay attention to who you're electing, because getting rid of the problem isn't so easy. And this is just but one example of who have you elected into your area to police crime. Because this case looks like it may not get resolved at this point, and it's incredibly sad. And for the world to see the fumblings in a case that probably happen often under his leadership, and they, the fact that people have vacated and left the department, and people that he's placed on desk duty with 20 years experience in homicide. Has that affected the case? I would say, yeah. The fact that there's reports that the guy that wanted to take the plane out, the only one qualified, the best qualified search guy, was denied because he was also placed on a desk job for speaking out against nanos. I mean, that whole county needs to be investigated. And this sheriff, in my opinion, needs to be removed. Just my opinion. I don't live there, but I'm glad I don't, because I wouldn't want this sheriff running my county. Thank you. Love and light. Tell me what you think.